Right, welcome everybody. Really excited to be here at the Teams Fest 2020 event, and I'm glad to share this particular session this morning from UK, and it's about deep dive Microsoft Teams integration with SharePoint. So feel free to check out the other events throughout the day. This is one of a kind for this particular year. So enjoy the session. A bit about myself before we go ahead. I'm Chirag Patel. Worked with SharePoint for around 15 odd years, and pretty much working in various capacities of as a delivery lead, IT pro, throughout all the engagements that I've been working with Office 365, Microsoft Teams in the last couple of years, and also being able to sort of work with various other Microsoft partners to help deliver solutions to their customers as well. I like to sort of keep myself busy if I can throughout the community events. It's the only way I get to learn and be able to also share some of those learnings through delivering a variety of sessions covering pretty much the whole of Microsoft 365 stack, mainly SharePoint for past years. And these are some of the events that I've spoken to, and speaking at a couple of events next week as well at Modern Workplace Summit. So feel free to check out the recording. Will be made available in 2 or weeks, and the slides, and you can get to then access some of the slides that I've uploaded onto my slideshare.net/techchirag URL. Okay, so in terms of the agenda for this session, it is a very much demo-based session, and it's probably the first of the session that I don't really have an agenda for this, because a lot of it is pretty much working in tandem with Teams as well as SharePoint. But for those of you who are not really familiar with Microsoft Teams in its entirety, it is very much a chat workspace that allows you to have one-to-one chats, multiple people, or as well as Teams related chats as well. And this session really focuses around the collaboration aspect of it, how the whole experience with SharePoint lights up within Microsoft Teams. And for most of you, you probably are familiar with using on a daily basis, working with files within your Teams channels and so forth. But also the power of being able to customize with Microsoft Teams using the connectors and apps, and be able to deliver your solutions on top of Microsoft Teams. And so it's kind of really if you like, a hub for teamwork, as Microsoft puts it, and that therefore to that effect, a platform for be able to manage work through your security and compliance, and be able to manage your services around Microsoft Teams. This particular session is not about coding. I don't do coding as such, other than maybe PowerShell or JSON scripting and client-side scripting tools. What you're going to see today is pretty much everything out of the box, and really kind of configuring your way around SharePoint as well as Microsoft Teams to be able to give that end user experience to basically get things done as far as users of your Microsoft Teams is concerned. So that's Microsoft Teams, and it's kind of, if you like, a very quick overview around that. Looking at SharePoint, what's the difference? And some of you might have the questions around, well, do I use SharePoint or do I use Microsoft Teams? And like many of you, I'm pretty sure you've come across so many graphics and slides that depicts what to use when, your inner loops and outer loops and so forth. And I won't go into that detail, but for me, really at the heart of it, all SharePoint is about is these 5 areas. The files, which is what we're used to working with within Microsoft Teams, and being able to sort of expand that on further by working with so-called document libraries, which we will take a look. And then you've also got pages, around being able to work with your web pages that you get with your SharePoint site, which is part of your Microsoft Teams, as well as being able to create and update your news pages with that. You also get the benefit of using lists or create your own lists, albeit for tracking or being able to track your lists, as well as being able to create your own list from Excel spreadsheets that you have. Pretty much any kind of list you prefer. The big part of that, of course, is working with SharePoint sites, and there are obviously two types you get. For this session, we will be focusing on Microsoft, beg your pardon, the SharePoint team sites, which is what really powers up all the Office 365 group resources and other artifacts you get with that. And then, of course, with your development skills, as well as being able to customize your whole SharePoint, you can bring all those experiences with that. So hopefully that kind of gives you kind of a very brief overview around what Microsoft Teams versus what SharePoint is about. And together, in my view, when working with various customers, for me, it's not so much about the technology names, but it's all about the collaboration workspace. And that's pretty much the term I use when it comes to delivering this kind of solutions. So yes, you use Teams pretty much on your daily basis, and you might not go that often into your SharePoint, but if you do, then you do bring all those experiences into Teams, just like the way you'd work within SharePoint. So in terms of creating the team sites, now for those of you who haven't rolled out Microsoft Teams or are not really kind of allowed, or there's restrictions in place, you can pretty much create SharePoint team site in 4 different ways, from within the SharePoint app itself through the start page, or from within Outlook Teams. If you create a new team, it creates a SharePoint team site in the background, as well as even if you create a planner plan as well. And what kind of brings these 4 elements together is the membership service called Office 365 Group, which is what really powers up all those Office 365 Group resources. And in essence, all that basically is doing is being able to be, giving you the chance to work from wherever you want, whatever the tools you're comfortable with, albeit within SharePoint or Outlook or Planner. So we'll kind of look at that. And in terms of creating a SharePoint team site, it really takes seconds. And so we can just take a quick look, and then we can kind of jump into the main parts of the demo. So here's my fictitious company, Contoso Electronics. I've come to office.com, and this is pretty much what I see on my personalized landing page. I can just go straight into, say, SharePoint here, for example, and that's going to give me an overview of the kind of news and updates that's happening within the organization, as well as some of the SharePoint team sites. And a lot of these team sites you see are backed by Microsoft Teams as well. So that's kind of happening in the background. But if I just go ahead and create a site, which is through these top links, again, in your case, yeah, some organizations restrict that, but there's no reason why you can't create a team site for the work that you want to do in order to satisfy your objectives. So I get 2 types of sites: communication site, mainly for your intranet, kind of company-wide for a wide audience's reach. You want to do that. Will not create Office 365 Group, but it will just be a plain SharePoint site that allows you to be able to create all the pages that goes with it. So as team site allows you to do that, but with team site you get the benefit of having that Office 365 Group associated with it. So in this case, I'll just quickly give a name of this new site, Teams Fest. Sounds okay to me. It's available. At this stage, I probably won't add anybody on to the group, but I could if I wanted to add additional owners and members, and I can just go ahead and finish that. And just like that, you have your SharePoint team site available. And whilst it's kind of, got all the pre-built menu structure on the left-hand side over here, and you can see conversations, documents, notebooks for OneNote that you get as part of your SharePoint team site. But also just in general, you got your basic homepage layout which a lot of the SharePoint folks will be familiar with in terms of what you get, and then how you can go further into expanding and customizing that page to satisfy. But you can see on the left hand side here, I've got this little option here to say, now that I've got my Teams Fest Microsoft Teams site, then I can go ahead and create a Microsoft Teams. So if I do that by creating a team, then what's that going to do is just in the background quickly create a Teams chat workspace. So there it says success. So if I click there, then it's going to say yes, don't want to use my current Teams client, so I'm just going to cancel that, but I'll open up the web app instead. And so that's going to just take me into my home, if you like, for the Microsoft Teams, and there that I have my Teams Fest chat space. That's kind of a very simple, if you like, a very fast kind of way of getting yourself up and running with your Microsoft Teams chat space through creation of SharePoint team site. I've of course got other teams in here, which I'm going to go a bit into further detail, in particular sales and marketing, but each of these teams that you see, market, project team, retail, sales and marketing, each of those has got its own SharePoint team site as well. So kind of to avoid any confusion for any users out there, if I have Teams, do I use SharePoint or Microsoft Teams? It really doesn't matter, because all the files that you see within this particular team chat spaces, they all reside in the one and only place within SharePoint. And that's how SharePoint is kind of, if you like, in charge of having your content files within that. So just go back to the slides. So that's kind of a quick way of getting your SharePoint team sites. And then once you're kind of in your SharePoint team sites, there are, over a period of time, you can do a lot of this. And in sort of kind of my view, if you like, it's kind of boils down into these three areas. So, very quickly create your site as we've just done, and then being able to add your Microsoft Teams chat space as well associated with that. But also by default, unless your organization has put any kind of restrictions, then that team site that I've just created is externally shareable already. So I can start inviting guests or users in SharePoint to be able to collaborate with my files. But I can go a few steps further and being able to go and build my site by having the ability to be able to create news updates, whether it's project updates or customer supplier updates, whatever the SharePoint team site you have, you can create all those news pages. So we will take a look at that in our demos, and also being able to sync your documents, not just from SharePoint, but also from Microsoft Teams as well. So same experience lives in two different places, but it does the same thing and producing the same results that you would have. And then obviously you have the area of being able to create your lists, and then being able to work with Power Apps as well as the Power Automate to create your flows in order to associate things that you want to do within your SharePoint. And then finally, we'll look at the experiences around OneNote Planner and group calendars, all coming inside your SharePoint, and then being able to translate all of that into Microsoft Teams. So let's go back to our demo. So if I go back to where I came from, so I'll close this Teams chat space for now. In fact, I'll leave that open, but I'll go back to my SharePoint team site. So I'll go over to the one that I've already got created. So if I go back to my sales marketing team site, which is no different to what we had just now in the Microsoft Teams for the Teams Fest. But here within the fact that I got my team site, I can actually go and look in the the Office 365 group elements of it. So I can just simply click on here on the title, and then I get more access to all the group card capabilities I have in here. So I can see what the group's about, the members, being able to view emails within that particular snapshot. All that group card is all available within this here as well as the files that are associated within this team site. So if I go back to my about screen, I can scroll further, who are the members, but I'm also able to get into all my mails and groups, as well as everything else associated with this particular site. So if I go into my group mailbox, and typically this is where it differs from your team channels, where the channels that you have within your teams, the conversations that will happen will be channel specific. But in order to have your team related conversations and your email that goes around it, you would normally come into here, where you actually can just send your emails out. So I can just send another email to say Teams Fest is happening. Fine. And send that off. So obviously that email is going to go to all the members of that particular team site, in this case SharePoint, the sales and marketing team site. But while I'm here, again, not necessarily just within Microsoft Teams, but I can also view my files inside Outlook through just going into the files elements of it as well. So here's some of the recent files that I've worked with, but also I've got my document library listed in there. And so my Microsoft Teams chat space has got two channels in them, general and monthly reports. So these are depicted as folders inside the main document library, as well as being able to work further within that particular library and have my formatting options available as well. So in this case, I've kind of added my two unique columns in order to have that rich metadata for my monthly reports folder within this document library. So from a user perspective, if they're comfortable with Outlook, they can still come over here and work with their files and just go ahead and open that file. Staying with this Microsoft group element of it, if I go into the calendar of it, then obviously with this particular calendar and my sales and marketing I'll get a shared calendar as part of that group. And so obviously these are some of the entries that I have within here. I'm not going to add any new entries, but the bit I wanted to show you here is being able to bring this calendar related info into my SharePoint team site. So if I go back to my, so I've got H2 goals and so on, calendar entries. If I now close this calendar tab, go back to my sales and marketing team site, I'm going to edit this home page and literally just the power of the pages are that, you know, as far as the pages are concerned, they're just canvas by themselves. What you see here, essentially, they're all the web parts. So I can just hover somewhere around, say, product plan here, and then I've got this little icon. I can just go ahead and add my web parts. And the beauty of this is that fact that you get a bunch of all these web parts that you can use to your heart's content to be able to make that page richer. So in this case, I'm looking for group calendar, which is here. So that group calendar is exactly the calendar that we saw within the calendar itself in Outlook. And so by adding that group calendar, I've got my 3 entries of the calendar for next week and so on. And I'm pretty happy with that here. So I can just go ahead and say republish. As far as my SharePoint homepage is concerned, I can have multiple pages if I wanted to have more information and web parts into them. Doesn't matter how many I have, but in this case, what I've got is that I've got 2 web parts that I want to highlight. Is the one that's called the activity, which pretty much is your site activity that goes on, whether it's the files or pages I've added, or in this case, I had a look at that entry earlier on. Then I've added sent an email to the group, so that gets recorded and part of the site activity, as well as I've got my other files within here as well. And then I've got my planner web part already that I inserted into this home page. So in this case, that's displaying all my charts and everything else that goes with this particular SharePoint team site. So I think at this stage, I'm probably happy with what I have with my SharePoint homepage. So now I can just go over to my Teams, and if I go into my sales and marketing team, and I've got a few conversations, chats going on there, and I'll go ahead and just add a tab. So when I add a tab, which is one of the powers of the Microsoft Teams chat space, as well as having all your connectors from different third-party systems, I've got the main Microsoft connectors here. So in this case, I can just go ahead and access the SharePoint tab. So whilst I'm here, then I can just choose which particular page I want to add. One of the new integration pieces you have is up until recent times, you were only able to add pages or lists, which we'll look at in a bit shortly. It was only from within the sales and marketing team side. I can add a page from another SharePoint site altogether, subject to permissions, of course, because otherwise you will get access denied. And I simply just type in the URL there from another SharePoint team site. But I don't want to do that yet, so I want to go back to my own sales marketing page. Go back. Okay, that's just a click job. Right, not sure what's happening there. Go back to my list, pages. There it goes, did it all. So I can just go and say, save that page. So in my tab, I'll get my sales and marketing page. So in this case, that's exactly the same page that I had in my SharePoint team site. So if I just expand this tab, so hide the menu on the left hand side, then I've got exactly a rich, insightful page. Not only that, it's displaying my news and updates, as well as some few links that I've got there, but also my group calendar in there as well. And this is probably by far the easiest way of displaying group calendaring kind of information. But also, if I've been on a holiday or come back after a while into these particular teams, then I can also see what's exactly been happening from a site activity point of view. So lots of info that you get in that one single tab, versus if you was to go and create multiple tabs, like for example, one for planner, one for calendars and everything else, then you're kind of saving yourself a good estate from your screen estate perspective to be able to bring all that information down here. And then of course you can go and click on any of these files and access your files as you normally do within here. So monthly reports is the area that I have. And so this is an example of a document library that I have. So in this case, I've kind of pinned, if you like, a couple of documents within here. But I've got my normal files, but in this case, I've added my document status and cells, as you saw earlier within Outlook. Same experience carries through into SharePoint, of course, as well as in Microsoft Teams chat space for sales and marketing. I can do all the things that I can do within SharePoint. So if I want to move this document status right at the end over here, then I can do that, and I can switch my columns around, or I can say I want to copy these two files for Australia and Brazil cells into, say, another folder, or even to that matter in another SharePoint site that I have here. So I can do pretty much what I can do, what I was able to do within SharePoint, all inside this Teams chat space, or copy into my OneDrive. I can also share these files if I wanted to. So if I do that, then I get the same consistent experience that I would in SharePoint as well as in OneDrive to be able to share a particular file or files to a group of users within that. Probably I think my internet is slightly playing up, so I won't wait for that. But I think you'll hopefully get the idea. It's the same sharing dialog you would get when sharing the file. Excuse me. So once I'm in here, then I can do a lot more around being able to select my views, which is one of the powers you get within a particular document library. And so in this case, I've got my old documents, but if I wanted to filter off any particular records, by, let's say, document status, where only show me the final documents, then I can just go ahead and filter my documents, apply that, and then just be able to see a subset of my files within here. And then if I want to have that pinned, that view all together, then I can just go and say, save that view as final version documents, and make that as a public view so that everybody can see that should they wish to choose. And so then as a result, I've got my two views now, all documents or final version documents. So you have that power of being able to even go and further configure your document library experience. For me, the one that sticks out is the fact that you can actually highlight your metadata here and just give that kind of extra added kind of value around for the users instead of just plain white interface for your document libraries. You can also bring the team's attention to have any particular files you want to highlight. So in this case, I've got my two files that I've kind of put for attention. If I don't really need those files, I can simply just unpin them. Sorry, let's select two files one at a time. So I can just edit the pin and just say simply unpin it, and I can just remove that from the section. So I can just choose anything that I want within here, and as well as I can get all my other menu options to be able to either download or copy the links and do all the other things that I can do within SharePoint. So in this case, I'll have that pinned to the top. And then, of course, obviously, you have the good old information activity pane as well. So for this particular file, Brazil sales, I've got my little preview in there, and then be able to sort of, go further into that as well. Okay, so that's pretty much from the document library experience that you can see within the actual Teams chat space. So if I go back to my Teams and go into general, then I've also got the other areas that I can bring around is the tabs around from the news perspective as well. So again, I can go back into my SharePoint and also being able to bring my news page as well. And this is probably one single part, if you like, from a pages perspective, that you can bring all your news articles into sort of one page, one tab altogether. So within here, I can filter out all my usual regular pages that I may have, but being able to bring all my news updates, whether it's the project updates or customer updates, doesn't matter how it is, by simply bringing those news pages within that. And of course, the good thing about here is that because this is a tab for all your news, then you can also have conversations around any particular news that you want within this tab itself. So all your conversations, commentary, or updates that you want can happen all inside your Microsoft Teams for this particular news tab that you have. Okay, so that was a very quick showcase around the document libraries, as well as being able to bring all your news in here. Now, if I go back to my slides, and then one here, so we kind of done a lot of those things here, but I think from a files perspective, when you just had a look at the document library, so far we only looked at the default document library that you get within your Microsoft Teams chat space. But the key differentiator here is from a structural perspective, is that your team related in sales and marketing, in this case, all the files that are in here, they all reside within a single document library. We'll look at that in a minute and how we can bring the other document library to it for different purposes that you may have. but also any group chats that you do or any files you share within your one-to-one chats or group chats, then all those files will reside in OneDrive. And after all, OneDrive is part of SharePoint. It's just another site, if you like, from a individual user perspective. So something to bear in mind is that if you do work in your space where not just from a collaboration perspective, but if you're working from a document management perspective and you have a set document libraries with a set security, even a set metadata around it, then in most cases you would create a different document library and not to mix up those documents inside your main channels that you have within here. So let's take a look at that. So if I go back to my SharePoint site, sales and marketing here, and one of the options you have here is the site contents. This is basically like your site map for your SharePoint site. And in terms of what you see here is that you have one documents library, document library, in which your channels are kind of folders within that's residing, as well as some of the raw documents that I've got within there. But what I want to do here is being able to go back and create my new document library. So I can do a number of ways. Go back to the home page if you like. And if you're a member of your team, then you will be able to do this to sort of satisfy your needs around different pockets of document library you want. So in this case, I'll probably call this a confidential documents, because then most probably I will apply security to that. So I'll go ahead and just create that. Once I do that, then all it does is just creates me another repository for putting all my files within there. So if I go into my documents and let's say I'll pick product overview, product pitch, and then I'll just copy them to my current sites, sales and marketing. And there's my new document library that I created, and I'll just copy them in there. So once I've kind of done that, then I can just go into my confidential documents, and there's my two documents that I've just simply copied across from one library to another. And now, so if I go back to my Teams chat space, and let's say I want to use the general channel and create a new tab, confidential document library in here. So in that case, I'll just go and choose document library. Again, I can choose relevant sites, so I can still bring document libraries, documents from another site, or use a SharePoint link. But in this case, I'll use sales and marketing because that's where my document library lives. And then also bring my confidential documents, which is there. Go ahead, next, and I'll probably rename that to save. So yeah, basically simple as that. You can bring your set of documents, and the idea here is that you want to try and separate your documents that you have, because your files will just fill up all the documents that you have. It may not have the right metadata unless you wish to put it. In this case, I don't have any files within this general channel, but I can bring my confidential documents within here, and those two files have just been highlighted here. So it's kind of a quick way to bring your SharePoint, all the artifacts within that SharePoint that goes into here. And so last but not least is something that you get with SharePoint is something called lists. So if I go back to my team site and if I go back to my site contents page, then at the moment I've got one that I created already that's called issues list, but I can create my new lists simply by just clicking on new list and either give it a name and go ahead, or I can just use create from an existing list as well. So if I do that, then I get the option to select which SharePoint team site I want to bring the list from, as long as one exists. So I think there's one probably existing within Mark 8. I think that was just there. So Mark 8 project team. So this is a different site that I have in here. and maybe I might want to bring, say, the IT help desk. There's a list there already, and I can just simply create, say, short S and sales and marketing. So, you know, as a marketing department, I'll probably have support queries that I might deal with, or no, not sure what happened there again. Let's go back. Always the case when you try and do the demo and things might have missed one step. I'll give that a quick try. SM help desk. Select my market project team, and then maybe I didn't select IT help desk, and that looks okay to me. So go ahead and create.
Chirag, the list is already there.
Sorry, say that again.
The list is already there. That's
okay.
It is not getting created.
Okay, all right. Yeah, no, thanks for that. I think probably I'm just doing something. I've missed a step here and there, but I think this does work. So there's the issues list that I wanted to show. So I'll quickly go there. But in terms of creating your list, you can simply create from an existing list in there. So just quickly close that down. And within the list itself, I can go to my, close the mail down, go into my monthly reports and create another tab, SharePoint, and go into my list tabs here. And I do know I've got two lists here, so I can go to my issues list and then just bring that list within that SharePoint that lives inside my Teams chat space as a tab. So if I close that conversation, expand the team, the space that I have here. So one of the things I can do is no different to Excel, except that with Excel, you normally have just the one file stuck in your files area, but you can actually expand your Excel file into multiple rows. And then to that effect, you can do lots of things. You can actually format these columns as well. So if I just simply click on that drop down, column settings, format this column here, I can then get the option to say edit that particular style. I might choose different icon for that purposes. So sorry, different colors, go in here, or go into more styles. Then I get even more options here as well. So might choose maybe say the triangle, save that, and then that triangle is appeared over here to what was before. So I can do all those things to my heart's content and change the formatting all within Teams itself and so forth. So you can do a number of formatting and be able to bring that list. And whilst this issues list is only unique to sales and marketing, but I may have the opportunity to share this particular issue that I have where, say, remote working for some users is a bit challenging, then I can actually share that item to somebody else in the company as well. I think for some reason in my tenant, this shared dialog is not working the way it should, but it should give me the options to present who I want to share this particular record safely, securely to that individual within the organization. So that's a very quick tour, if you like, in terms of covering all the experiences within what you get within SharePoint. So, you know, we kind of brought the document library, the different document library that you have for confidential documents, and being able to bring your lists and being able to format some of these columns for easy kind of to use workability.
Can we hide that? Can we hide that SharePoint menu bar on the top? Say like new quick edit. That piece can we hide as part of Teams?
No, you can't. In fact, what used to happen before is that when you were able to bring that back, there was no command bar, as we call it here, before at all. And there was a lot of, if you like, a request in the community for people to be able to work within Teams using the same toolbar experience that you get in SharePoint. So in order to kind of, you know, provide that consistent experience, so I think Microsoft have brought that experience into Teams, so that you don't feel left out, that you keep having to go back to SharePoint to do the things you need to. So the answer is no, you can't switch that off. It's part of your lists and document library. So, and that will change depending on what you're trying to do. within here. So if I click two items, then the only option I get is to just delete these 2 items, and so on. So no, I think there's pros and cons, but for those who are new to Teams, who's, let's say, never used SharePoint, then for them to be able to do these actions very quickly is the most immersive way of doing within Teams. So I'm just conscious of time wise. I think I'm literally up to the hour. So that was pretty much all my demos that I had in terms of what we covered off. So, you know, SharePoint and Teams, they're not separate things. They're all together, and being able to sort of provide each of those experiences in different places on that. We looked at how, you know, the Teams groups are integrated very closely, and being able to work within Outlook and using your files, and also being able to use a couple of web parts to keep the team in the know. Document libraries, we looked at quite some of the actions, as well as being able to format those columns in there, and being able to work with the pages, news, bringing all that into the Teams chat spaces as well. Last but not least, we looked at the lists. So in my view, all lists are just web tables in your SharePoint team side. So, you know, why go through the hassle of working with something that's simple list in an Excel when you can actually get a lot more functionality within the teams using SharePoint lists, and being able to sort of get things done as per your teamwork. Last but not least, it's just another way to look at the files differently. OneDrive is purely for your personal, private, related files. You can share it to a couple of people as a draft.
You're on mute for some reason.
Chirag, you went on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So I think that's kind of pretty much wraps up, if you like, in terms of my presentation. Thank you very much for being here. And, you know, you can reach out to me on Twitter and LinkedIn. And if you have any particular questions or queries, happy to answer them. Here's the, if you can, you know, maybe wave a camera or something on the QR code. Any constructive feedback, happy to take them. But really, thank you to the organizers, and enjoy the rest of the day and the show from the great speakers that we have. And I've got a session later on at 4 o'clock, how to roll out Microsoft Teams in a global organization. So hopefully you can join me then as well. And that is in room 1 later on. So thank you very much.
Chirag, before you leave,
sure.
I've tried several ways to get that Contoso look and feel on my personal tenant. Is there anything that we have to enable to get that CSS on the tenant level in Office 365?
So when you say personal tenant, so the tenant I'm using is a demo tenant. So you go to, I believe it's microsoftofficedemos.com, and if you're a Microsoft partner, or if you've got the other privileges, then you can get the Contoso tenant through that. If it's your personal tenant, whether that's from Office 365 developer perspective, then you don't get that Contoso demo data within that.
Okay, so a person like me who is practicing cannot get the demo at all?
Sorry, so that kind of just cut me off there.
Sorry?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I mean to say, like, you know, a regular person like me who is practicing Office 365 cannot get that tenant of Contoso demo tenant?
I believe not.
Okay.
It's available to the partners, but what I would do is, if you have your plain tenant, the simplest way of doing it is, from my point of view, it's just a couple of team sites I would create, and you can create either to match your organization's perspective, or you can just create, like I say, dummy sites. So one for sales marketing, one for say IT or HR, and then just have some random documents in your document libraries. It does take an effort to get to that, but what I can do is I've got some sample documents that I use, and I also use a sample app to randomly generate documents, and I can sort of give you links on that.
Yeah, that would be great. And last but not least, is that the search bar on top of the site, is that only for the demo tenant or it is working for the personal tenant also? Because I spun up 2, 3, but I don't see the search box on top of the site, which I see only that Contesto tenant alone.
Yeah, no, so it depends on your tenant whether you're part of a standard release or the targeted release. So I know that experience is rolling out throughout all the different Office 365 services. So it could be maybe in your tenant, you might be part of the standard release, or it's just not available in your tenant yet. I know for some of my customers that I work with, they all see the search toolbars at the top. So I would probably wait a few days, if not maybe just say a few weeks. It will be there.
Yeah, because I spun up a tenant just 10 days back. Even in that also, I don't see that. Anyways,
Right.
thank you.
Sure. No, it'll come along. It's happening. One search toolbar right at the top, and so it's consistent.
Thank you.
Great. Excellent. Thanks very much for your questions, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you all.